I've had a lot of fun over the last couple days creating Dungeons and Dragons characters using my favorite or some of my favorite pop culture icons. And in that way, I used The Mandalorian and Luke Skywalker to start. I'm going to do more of that in the coming weeks. However, today I wanted to take a broader view and just share with you some of my approaches to coming up with some fascinating D&D 5e character ideas. Once in a while, I get very lucky, and when I'm going to be in a game, whether it's a one-shot or if it's going to be a campaign, regardless, I get an idea about a character I want to play. Sometimes it comes from, like, a certain feat that I want to try out, or maybe it comes with a combination of class, race, or so forth, and I'm like, oh, wow, what if I did that? Sometimes it's even got a theme. Like, for instance, I created a fire genasi that was fascinated and focused on mastering all of the elements so that he could understand how and why he was born as a genasi, right? And so I've had some fun creating those characters, and a lot of times it comes easy, but other times it doesn't. Other times it's a real challenge. And so I wanted to share some of the techniques that I use in creating D&D 5e characters. And this actually works for pretty much any RPG. You really could use this across the board in pretty much any game. So I'm not ashamed to say that sometimes I go to some of my heroes from either books, movies, stories, television, anywhere I can think of that I gather inspiration from or that have inspired me in my life. In fact, I'm going to take it back real old school and talk about my very first Dungeons and Dragons character. My very first D&D character was actually inspired by the ElfQuest books by Wendy and Richard Pini. They are a fantastic set of graphic novels. You may also be familiar with them as comic books. You may not have ever heard of them. Either way, if you don't know about them, go check them out. And if you do know, then you understand why I was hugely inspired and influenced by these books. I read them as a young boy, an early teenager, even like preteen, maybe like 11, 12, I might have started reading them. And those, along with Dragonlance, the Dragonlance series, those books together really inspired me to absolutely fall in love with Dungeons and Dragons. Now, the ElfQuest series really has nothing to do with Dungeons and Dragons. It's just a cool fantasy story. And the main character in that story is an elf named Cutter. He's this super cool warrior. He rides a wolf. He's like the big, he's just a total badass. And he happens to be the chief of the tribe and all this. So he was a huge inspiration to me. And when I was a young dude, I was, I had no concept about Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't have any experience. I didn't have anyone that was showing me the way or any, examples to draw from. And so I just went with what I knew. I literally just this is the character I want to play. He's an elf and he's cool and he uses this. And that was a great place to start, I think. I've had a really cool experience a couple years ago. I was playing Dungeons & Dragons 4E, and I loved 4th edition. I had fun coming up with neat and interesting combinations. Again, I love the mechanics of this game, and so for me, it was fun to tweak and massage and try to find interesting ways to put all of the mechanical parts that 5E was sort of known for, and try to find really cool combinations. To me, that was exciting, and it was sort of easy to come up with character ideas. As well, at the same time, I got to play at a game shop, and one of the guys in the game shop had a really neat approach to creating characters. Basically, he did things thematically, and I've adopted this. I've kind of shared this with you loosely in some of the vlogs, but I've adopted this sort of approach because I love the idea of what would you do if you're going to make Batman as a D&D character, or Iron Man, or Apollo, or Zeus, or any of the Greek gods or the Egyptian gods, or any one of these kind of mythic creatures. You could take any mythology from anywhere in the world including modern mythology like Star Wars. Heck, even a character like Indiana Jones. I mean, how easy and how cool would it be to make a Dungeons and Dragons character that was essentially Indiana Jones? It's a piece of cake. I could figure out 2 or 3 different ways that I would approach that character. And so what I'm suggesting, what I'm getting at is that it's actually pretty darn easy to come, in my opinion, this is my opinion. In my opinion, it's pretty darn easy to come up with 5e D&D characters if you just like get your own head and your own mind, your own ego maybe out of the way for a second and pretend you're a kid or something. You know, most of us when we were kids, we wanted to be Superman. We wanted to be Batman. We wanted to be Wolverine or, you know, Professor X. Well, maybe not Professor X, but we wanted to be one of the X-Men, or we wanted to be, you know, Luke Skywalker or Han Solo or, you know, all of these great characters. Even even the cartoons we probably watched. Maybe we wanted to be a cartoon character in some way. All of these things from our childhood or our adulthood, all of these things, Lord of the Rings, there's a million, the list goes on and on and on. Pick your favorite novel, pick your favorite comic book, pick your favorite TV show, pick your favorite movie, take your favorite character, and then turn them into a D&D character. That's what I do sometimes. That's actually been some of the most fun characters I've played, I think, on a certain level, have been from that. Or at the very least, I've borrowed names from those characters. I've used the names from comic books because I thought, what a cool name, I'm going to use that for a character, and then I just made a character and used that name. Some of the times, like, name generators are great, and honestly, what's kind of interesting, another approach you could actually take, pick a name. Just start with a name. Come up with some interesting, fascinating, or totally random name, and then see what happens. Just put it on the page at the top of the character sheet. Maybe you roll some attribute. I was going to say stats. Maybe you roll some attributes, your character attributes, and maybe you even leave them in order and see where it leads. There's so many different ways you can approach character generation. I feel like there are an infinite number of character ideas. Really infinite number of character ideas. All we have to do is sort of step back for a moment and think about who and what inspires us. If we do that, there's going to be many ideas that pop into our minds, in my opinion. This has been my experience. Maybe it's not the same for you. If it's not, I understand that, and I hope that this kind of idea, this concept of like literally going to pop culture and picking any random, you know, pop culture character from, again, cartoons, TV, movies, anything like that, and then taking that and finding a way to turn those into D&D characters. And you might find that it's lots of fun. You might also find that you can't stand it, which is good, because if you find out what you don't like, it'll help you figure out what you do like. Thank you for tuning in. Share your character creation ideas with us, because we're all learning in the comments. I will see you at a table someday. Keep rolling 20s. Check out one of the videos here next. And remember, it's your game. Play your way.